Shingabawossins, The Image Stone by Dennis M. Morrison, published in the Sunriseside Historical Bulletin by Treasure Cove Publications in 1995. The human form in Indian art is fairly common, but here in Michigan, the Great Lakes state, it would seem that the practice of displaying the form of man was, in fact, quite rare. Several examples come to mind from Michigan. Man is depicted in rock drawings, and there have been a number of human face effigy pipe bowls, the most famous recovered from Bois Blanc Island near Mackinac Island. There is, however, in my opinion, an entire class of effigy figures that have been overlooked by artifact collectors as well as professionals when dealing with Michigan archaeological sites, and in turn, similar finds made elsewhere in the Americas have also been overlooked. And I'm speaking of stones which have been shaped by the forces of nature into forms resembling that of man. What better place could there be for such finds to be made than where the Manitou's great waterways have for ages wrought their effects on that which is ageless stone? I have been fortunate enough to excavate 3 such pieces myself. The site where 2 of these were recovered was in my backyard where I lived with my parents in Ossineke. As a collector of Indian art and a student of their ancient ways, I was elated to say the least when I discovered this site. In fact, it was a dream come true, as I unearthed pot shards and stone relics right there on the gentle slope which my bedroom overlooked, a slope which leads gracefully down to Benetton Lake. Before describing these stones to you, let me tell you a little about the background of Benetton Lake. To the north, Pine River exits the lake. Along these northern banks, local farmers have unearthed the remains of archaic period habitations. To the south of the relatively small lake, Benetton Creek exists. The banks of Benetton Creek, as it meanders for about 2 miles to join up with the mighty Osable River, was in fact a mecca for Indians of the late woodland period and, to a certain degree, the middle woodland period. To the north end of the lake is a fairly small island. No doubt in the colorful mind of the late woodland peoples, this emerald green gem was considered a turtle, a place not unlike Mackinac Island where the Manitous dwelled. With all this around me, it really should have come to no surprise that artifacts were present in my backyard. But back to the image stones. The first stone face I recovered was about 4.5 inches in length and was sandy brown in color. It was formed naturally into a face and profile. The backside had, however, been hollowed out for some purpose. Traces of black paint still adhered to the stone where the eyes were painted on. Nonetheless, I would probably have overlooked this piece had it not been for the curious surroundings it was found in. The little face was on top a pile of chert flakes which had been arranged with care in a circular formation. The overall appearance made me think this was a ceremonial spot of some religious import. It vaguely reminded me of a primitive altar. I contacted James P. Whittle of the Early Sites Research Center in Raleigh, Massachusetts. In reply, Mr. Whittle stated that, and I quote, "I would suggest it is from a shaman's kit. Strange artifacts of this nature do show up all over the world from time to time. Most shake their heads at them and cast them out. It was certainly recovered in the correct context," end quote. The second such stone was recovered only a few feet away in the smashed remains of a late woodland pottery vessel. This piece was more crude in that it did not appear to have been physically altered from what nature had herself supplied. Profile faces do not appear to be all that uncommon in this part of Michigan. Not a half a mile from my backyard site, I excavated a pottery face with a hole drilled where the eye should be. It seemed to me rather strange that I could find nothing in modern writings about this type of relic. I contacted an archaeologist on the state level. Point in fact, without mentioning names, he is the highest ranking archaeologist paid by the state of Michigan, at least at the time this was written. It was his contention that the Indians of Michigan never made such use of stone, yet here I had proof that they indeed did. This past summer, the Great Spirit showed upon me as I at last found some good information about the little image stones. And I happened across a rare copy of The American Indian by Henry Rowe Schoolcraft. The volume printed in 1851 was beautifully rebound and holds a coveted spot in my collection. Schoolcraft knew the American Indian in intimate terms. He was a student of their ways before white man's despoiling had completely obliterated the artifacts of earlier times. Later, he was Commissioner of Indian Affairs for the United States and was installed at Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. In his book, Schoolcraft, said, and I quote, "The native tribes who occupy the borders of the Great Lakes are genuous in converting to the uses of superstition such masses of loose rock or boulder stones as have been threaded by the action of water into the shapes resembling the trunks of human bodies or other organic forms. There appears," he continued, "at all time they have been a ready disposition to turn such masses of rude natural sculpture, so they call them, to an idolatrous use, as well as a most ingenious tact of aiding the effect of the natural resemblance. The effect of the natural resemblance by dots and dabs of paint added by them to denote the eyes and other features, or by rings of red ochre around the circumference by way of ornamentation." End quote. Schoolcraft was fascinated by the superstitious beliefs of the Indians, and he wrote of these beliefs in connection to the image stones. And again I quote, "To the natives who are not prone to reason for cause to effect, such productions appear wonderful. All that is past comprehension wonderful is attributed by them to the supernatural agency of the spirit of the hunter or warrior who is traveling along the coast and finds one of these self-sculptured stones, is not sure that it is not a direct interposition of his god or guardian Manitou in his favor. He is habitually a believer in the most subtle form of mysterious power, which he acknowledges to be often delegated to the native priests or necromancers." End quote. Then of the smaller stones, such as iron earth, he remarked, and again I quote, "The smaller image is generally taken with him and secreted in the neighborhood of his lodge. If large and too heavy for this purpose, it is set up on the shore, generally in some obscure nook, where an offering of tobacco or something else of less value may be made to it, or rather through it, to the spirit." Image 11 on the drawing was discovered by an expedition the government sent north in 1820. The find was made on Thunder Bay Island in Lake Huron, about 40 miles north of Oscoda. And the piece was described as a massy stone, rounded with comparatively broad base. A lot of evidence is piling up about the Indians using stones as effigies, despite the objections of modern-day Johnny-come-latelys who say they did not. 30 miles north of Oscoda, on the site of my two finds, is a small town of Ossineke. The Indians pronounced it Wassineke, meaning literally place of the image stones. In times past, a great chief lived there. His name was Shingabawossins. He put down many image stones at this place. In fact, he told his people that his spirit would come back after death to the place of the image stones at the mouth of the Devil River. Record has it that at the moment of the Devil River, so named by the Indians because of the big marshes which were hard to cross, in 1838 there stood two stones worshipped as sacred by the tribes of the area. One of the images was of gneiss rock with bands of quartz, and I know I pronounced that wrong, having the appearance of being worked into shape by water. It was said to weigh about 300 pounds. The other stone was about 4 feet long, having the shape of a man minus arms, legs, and head. It is said to have had the appearance of being molded from lake sand, the surface being concreted with a substance resembling bark. According to a history of the Ossineke area written in 1876 by David D. Oliver, the stone of the second image was hard on the outside but soft and crumbly inside. The origins of these sacred stones, about which it is said hovered the spirits of the divine chief, Shingabaw, is lost in the maze of antiquity. Nonetheless, it has been handed down through Indian legend that hostile tribesmen raided the sacred grounds of the Chippewas, captured two of the latter, and taking their captives and the sacred stones in canoes, started to cross Thunder Bay. Reaching the middle of the bay, they threw the stones overboard. The water immediately boiled up and drowned the raiders, while the captive Chippewas safely returned to shore in the canoes, only to find the stones in their former place. During the 1840s, Ossineke, being on Lake Huron shore, had a major industry in fishing. Fishermen who put ashore at the mouth of the Devil River, needing anchors for nets, took the stones for that purpose. However, this time they did not return, and it is now believed that somewhere on the bottom of Lake Huron these ancient relics remain hidden. There is an interesting side note to the Ossineke story. Although it has nothing to do with the image stones, it does say a lot about the people who worshipped them. Both sides of the Devil River were occupied by Indian burial grounds. Within a mile or so of these was, at one time, an image of an actual Indian mound, which has since been despoiled. In the mound was found a human skull which had been trepanned, that is, an early form of brain surgery. And despite the claims of those in the know, image stones of this sort I recovered have never been unearthed elsewhere in Michigan. To other collectors in Michigan and elsewhere, I caution you to watch close that you do not overlook these pieces. And the question of trepanning I had never heard of in the continental United States before the Native Americans doing this. So if indeed it was practiced in the Ossineke area, it was a unique process that was quite advanced for the time of the Indians to open up the skull for one purpose or another. One other thing, a lesson learned here: no matter what those who are learned and well-educated have to say, they can be wrong. If you have found a relic of questionable category, but you have a gut feeling of its authenticity, don't despair. Just keep a watchful eye, and the Manitus will bring all the knowledge to you.